Greetings, it's Dr. Franklin, and this is a mini lecture dealing with online experimental methods. In this presentation, folks, I'm going to talk about the 3 types of experiments that are traditionally carried out in offline settings. From there, I'll start talking about the nuances of online experiments, and then the vast bulk of the presentation today, folks, will focus on advantages and disadvantages of online experiments. Within psychological research, the experimental approach has been extremely important and useful for determining cause and effect relationships between variables. At the heart of this approach is the researcher's ability to control or manipulate variables as well as assess them accurately. Generally, there are 3 types of experiments. The first type of experiment is a laboratory controlled research project, which involves the researcher controlling and manipulating all relevant variables. The second type of experiment is field research, in which the researcher manipulates variables of importance, but unfortunately cannot control extraneous or confounding variables. Finally, there is the natural experiment conducted in everyday life, and the researcher is unable to exert any control or influence over any variables. Online psychological experiments are experiments that are conducted within the user's web browser. Online psychological experiments have increased in recent years due to access to the internet, increased ability to promote and create interactivity between the user and technology, and increases in broadband internet speeds. There are a number of websites that are solely dedicated to the promulgation of online psychological experiments, such as Psychological Research on the Net and Online Social Psychology Studies. Psychological Research on the Net contains many links to active studies across a range of areas such as emotions, lifespan and development, linguistics, media, mental health, and other topics. Online Social Psychology Studies is maintained by Wesleyan University, and it has links to over 285 web-based experiments. Conducting online psychological experimental research in some ways may overcome some of the challenges and limitations of face-to-face experimental methods. One of the advantages of an online psychological experiment is the fact that a research confederate can run more participants at one time than in a face-to-face laboratory setting. Additionally, the pool from which these participants may be obtained is much larger in an online setting. Online experimental approaches don't have to deal with the limitations of time. For example, during the summer, participants may not be available on campus for a face-to-face study, and groups of participants can be ran simultaneously. The demographics of individuals that participate in online experimental psychological research is much more diverse, and this may lead to more accurate generalization. Some research is highlighting how the population online is well on its way to mirror the general population. In face-to-face experimental research, many of the participants involved in laboratory studies tend to be female, have the same educational background, and be of similar age. These types of samples can be problematic given that the general population differs from undergraduate students in a myriad of ways, and this includes identity formation, cognitive skills, and compliance with authority. Nevertheless, online experiments may play a seminal role in external validity, given that the findings that are often revealed in lab studies are thought by the researchers to have real-world consequence. If this is indeed the case, then the online environment provides a rich opportunity for replication, or rather, an assessment of the reliability of the research findings, given how most participants complete these studies on the go or in the convenience of their home or work environments. Critics of face-to-face experimental research have noted that most of the studies are conducted during business hours in a work week, and thus are only generalizable to that time frame. Online experiments, however, have the convenience of being conducted 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and researchers are able to obtain timestamps as to when participants complete certain aspects of their study. There are many researchers, for the aforementioned reasons, who believe that the online experimental method provides more of an opportunity to get meaningful information about participants outside of the normal circadian rhythms of our everyday lives. Given that many undergraduate students are required to participate in face-to-face experimental research for a grade or as a course requirement, it's thought that participant bias may factor into their responses. In other words, some volunteers may be more or less motivated to participate than others. In comparison, people who choose to participate in online experimental research may be more engaged for the simple reason that they have taken time to read about the study and access the website. I will end by discussing a series of benefits that are present because the experimenter is absent in online experimental research. One of the benefits is that the respondents will not obtain subtle cues from the researcher and thus be influenced by the researcher to respond in a certain way. Because the experimenter will not be physically present, like in a face-to-face setting, the likelihood of obtaining genuine responses increases. From a financial point of view, the experimenter's lack of presence could be more cost efficient if the researcher has a number of research responsibilities, and because the research is being conducted online, there's a higher likelihood of the researcher obtaining more participants. Finally, the absence of the experimenter increases the sense of anonymity on behalf of the respondents, and it could help them to share more personal and or sensitive information that perhaps they would be reticent to do if they were face-to-face. Now, briefly, I want to discuss a number of disadvantages that researchers should consider if they are going to engage in online psychological experimental research. Some of these disadvantages mirror the types of issues that would need to be thought through if one were conducting online focus groups, online interviews, research using social media, or some other methodological approach. One of the disadvantages is level of control. Remember, control and manipulation of variables is a central aspect of experimental approaches. It would be extremely important for the researcher to ensure that participants only completed the online experiment once. The second disadvantage could be the representativeness of the sample. Though online research samples tend to be diverse, it does not mean that the sample gleaned online will mirror the population of interest or the group of individuals that the researcher wants to generalize to. So monitoring who is engaging in the study becomes increasingly important because individuals who choose to engage in online research and individuals who have access to the internet sometimes differ subtly and dramatically from individuals who do not want to participate and those that do not have access to the internet. Finally, it may be a challenge to researchers to keep participants motivated and engaged in psychological research, and so dropout rates may be a significant challenge and something to consider. Thanks for listening.